A 6-year-old girl walked into a bakery on her birthday. Her mother asked the cashier for an expired cake, anything they were going to throw away, just so her daughter could have something to celebrate with. The store manager heard her, and instead of helping, he humiliated them in front of every customer in the room. What he didn't know was that someone was sitting in the corner, listening to every word. And that someone was Keanu Reeves. It was a Tuesday afternoon at Rosemary's, a small bakery on a quiet street in Glendale, California. Nothing special about the day. Ovens humming, sugar in the air, families picking up cupcakes after school. The kind of place where the biggest decision anyone made was chocolate or vanilla. Then the door opened, slow and hesitant, and a woman walked in holding the hand of a little girl. The woman's name was Darla Whitfield, 31 years old, though you wouldn't guess it. She had the kind of tired that doesn't come from a bad night's sleep. Comes from 11 months of not knowing where you're going to sleep at all. Her clothes were clean but wrinkled. Her shoes were scuffed. Her jacket was too thin. But her daughter's hair was brushed perfectly. That tells you everything you need to know about Darla Whitfield. The girl was Hattie, 6 years old today. Small for her age, shoes worn paper-thin at the soles. But her eyes were bright, the way children's eyes stay bright until the world teaches them otherwise. They stood in front of the glass display case and Hattie went still. Vanilla buttercream roses, chocolate ganache, strawberries like jewels, rainbow sprinkles, candles in every color. To everyone else in that bakery, these were just cakes. To Hattie, they were everything she couldn't have. She pressed her fingers against the glass and whispered, "Mom, can I pick one?" Darla forced a smile, the kind that doesn't reach the eyes. She leaned toward the counter where a young cashier named Jolene was arranging napkins, and she spoke so softly she barely made a sound. "Excuse me, do you have any expired cakes? Anything you might be throwing away? It doesn't have to be fresh." Her voice cracked. "It's my daughter's birthday today." Jolene opened her mouth to answer. She never got the chance. "What did you just say?" Mr. Pemberton, the store manager, stocky guy, pressed shirt, name tag pinned to his chest like a medal. He walked toward Darla and looked her up and down, then looked at Hattie's worn-out sneakers, and something shifted in his face. Not pity, something closer to disgust. He spoke loudly. He wanted everyone to hear. "This is a bakery, not a soup kitchen. The cakes here are for paying customers. If you can't afford to buy something, I'm going to have to ask you to leave. You're making the other customers uncomfortable." A woman in a designer jacket laughed. A man behind her shook his head. Nobody said a word. Nobody told Mr. Pemberton that a 6-year-old girl was standing right there, listening. Hattie lowered her head. Her hand tightened around her mother's fingers. She didn't cry. She just pressed her lips together and held everything inside, the way she'd learned to do over 11 months of holding everything inside. Darla blinked hard, twice. Then she pulled Hattie's hand. "Come on, baby. Let's go." Hattie turned away from the cakes without a word. She followed her mother toward the door, shoulders slumped, worn-out shoes shuffling against the tile. But someone else was in that bakery. In the far corner, tucked into a booth by the window, sat a man in a black t-shirt, faded jeans, and a baseball cap pulled low. A paperback book open beside a half-finished coffee. Nobody had noticed him. That was the point. His name was Keanu Reeves. He'd heard everything. He'd watched Hattie's face light up at the cakes, and he'd watched that light go out when Pemberton opened his mouth. He'd watched a room full of people choose silence over decency. He closed his book, set it on the table, and stood up. The chair scraped the floor. Heads turned. One by one, every person in the bakery realized who'd been sitting in the corner the whole time. Dead silence. Keanu walked past the counter, past Mr. Pemberton, past the staring faces. He reached Darla just as her hand touched the door handle. "Excuse me," he said. Low, calm, steady. Darla turned. Red eyes. Wet cheeks. Confusion, then recognition, then fear. But Keanu wasn't looking at her. He knelt down. right there on the floor in front of everyone until he was eye level with Hattie. He looked at her worn-out shoes, her fraying hair tie, her small, honest eyes, and he smiled. "Hey there, sweetheart. Which cake do you want for your birthday?" Hattie stared at him. She had no idea who he was. To her, he was just a tall man in a black t-shirt, kneeling on a bakery floor, asking about her birthday cake like it actually mattered. She raised one small finger and pointed at the vanilla cake with pink buttercream roses and rainbow sprinkles. "The most beautiful cake in the case." "That one," she whispered. Then quickly, "But just a small piece is okay." Keanu looked at her for a long moment. Then he stood up and turned to Jolene. "I'll take the whole cake. 7 candles. 6 for her birthday, 1 for luck." He put $500 on the counter without counting. "And 2 hot sandwiches. Pastries from the window. Whatever soup you have. Something warm for the little one. Bag it all up." Jolene's eyes were already red. "Yes, sir. Right away." That was when Mr. Pemberton stepped forward. His whole face had rearranged itself. Stiff authority replaced by something eager. Something sweet. The kind of expression that appears when someone realizes kindness is profitable. "Mr. Reeves, what an honor. Let me personally take care of everything. On the house, of course." Keanu looked at him. No anger. No raised voice. Just steady, quiet eyes. "A few minutes ago, you told a woman and her daughter to leave because they couldn't afford a cake. You embarrassed them in front of everyone. A little girl on her birthday. And now you want to serve me for free because you know my name." He paused. "You don't see anything wrong with that?" Pemberton went pale. His mouth opened and closed. Nothing came out. He backed against the wall. The woman who'd laughed stared at her phone. The man who'd shaken his head shifted his weight, looking at the floor. The whole bakery stood in the kind of silence that makes people suddenly aware of exactly who they are. Darla stepped forward. "Please, we don't need all this. We didn't come here for charity." Keanu turned to her. His voice shifted. "Gentler. Careful. The way you talk to someone who's been hurt so many times that kindness itself feels dangerous. This isn't charity. Every kid deserves a birthday cake. That's not charity. That's just how it should be." They sat in his booth while Jolene prepared everything. Hattie pressed her nose against the window, legs swinging, feet not reaching the floor. Darla sat stiff, hands in her lap, waiting for the catch. Keanu let the silence settle. Then he asked, "How long have you two been on your own?" Darla hesitated. Then she told him. 11 months. She'd been an accountant at a small firm downtown. Nothing fancy, but it kept the rent paid and food on the table. Then the company went under. One Friday they called everyone into a conference room and told them not to come back Monday. She looked for work everywhere. But when you're a single mother with no family, no backup, things unravel fast. Savings gone in 3 months. Landlord gave her 2 weeks. She couldn't make it. After that, shelters and food lines and trying to keep Hattie from understanding what was really happening. "Most mornings I take her to the park early," Darla said, staring out the window. "Before the other kids show up, so she can play without anyone staring at her clothes. Afternoons we go to the library. It's warm and she can read. She loves reading. She'll sit there for hours with a picture book, quiet as anything, not bothering a soul." Her voice cracked softly. "She never complains. Not once. She just holds my hand and goes wherever I go." Keanu listened without interrupting. When she finished, the silence between them had weight, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was the kind of silence that comes after someone trusts you with something real. He looked down at his coffee cup. When he spoke, his voice was quieter, as if the words were coming from a place he didn't open very often. "I had a friend once. A long time ago, before any of this." He gestured vaguely, a small wave that seemed to take in the bakery, the people staring, the life that had made him recognizable. She was a single mother, raising her little girl on her own, working 2, 3 jobs. Never asked anyone for help. Too proud, I think. or too tired to believe anyone would show up if she did. He paused. I wanted to help, but I kept telling myself I'd do it when things got better, when I had more, when the timing was right. There was always a reason to wait. His jaw tightened. Then she got sick. Fast. By the time I understood how serious it was, she was gone. Her daughter was placed with another family. I lost track of her. I never saw that little girl again. He looked at Darla. For years, I asked myself the same thing. What if I hadn't waited? It's the kind of question that doesn't go away. It just sits there, quietly, every single day. He paused. When I saw you and Hattie walk in today, I saw my friend. I saw her little girl. And I thought, this time, I'm not going to wait. He called his assistant Reggie, asked him to prepare an empty apartment in a building he owned in Burbank. Stock the fridge. Basic supplies. Darla shook her head. No, I can't. I don't know what you'd want from us. I can't put Hattie in a situation where... I don't want anything, Darla. I just want Hattie to have a safe place to sleep tonight. That's the whole thing. Darla looked at her daughter. Hattie was watching Jolene place 7 candles into vanilla frosting, her face glowing in a way Darla hadn't seen in months. She closed her eyes, breathed, opened them, and nodded. Neither of them noticed the man in a dark sedan across the street. Telephoto lens on the steering wheel. Camera clicking every few seconds. His name was Derek Sloan. Professional paparazzi. He picked up his phone. Curtis, I just hit gold. Start drafting. Whatever angle gets the most clicks. The drive to Burbank took 20 minutes. The building was nothing fancy. 4-story brick, flower boxes in the windows, kids' bikes chained to the railing, families walking in and out. Normal life. Apartment 9, 4th floor. Small. 2 bedrooms. Clean. Sunlight through big windows. A kitchen with a window that looked over a courtyard where someone had planted a lemon tree. Darla stood in the middle of the living room and didn't move. She looked at the walls, the windows, the real hardwood floor. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. Hattie ran. She opened kitchen cabinets and found plates stacked neatly inside. She gasped at the bathtub, a real bathtub with a faucet that worked and a bar of soap that smelled like lavender. She found the first bedroom with clean white sheets and a window facing the sunrise. And then she found the second bedroom. A single bed with a soft blue blanket, a pillow that smelled fresh, a small desk by the window, and a bookshelf against the far wall. Empty, waiting to be filled. She stood in the doorway staring at that bed for a long time. Then she turned around. Mom, is this my room? Do I have my own bed? Like the kids on TV. Darla dropped to her knees and held her daughter so tight that Hattie laughed. First laugh all day. Keanu explained the setup. Groceries already delivered. Utilities covered for 12 months. Elementary school 4 blocks away. Mrs. Odell, the building manager downstairs, could help with anything. A nonprofit downtown would reach out about job training and placement. The goal isn't for me to take care of you forever, he said. The goal is to give you enough ground to take care of yourself. You were an accountant. You know how to work. You just need the chance. That evening, they lit 7 candles. Hattie closed her eyes for a long time, concentrating hard. She opened them, looked straight at Keanu. I wished that you wouldn't be sad anymore. About your friend. Keanu didn't move for a long time. Thank you, Hattie. That's the kindest wish anyone has ever made for me. She blew out all 7 candles in one breath. They ate cake on real plates at a real table. For the first time in 11 months, it felt like a real birthday. Keanu left an hour later. Hattie hugged his neck so hard he almost fell over. He held her carefully, eyes closed. For a moment, he was somewhere else. Years ago, another little girl. He told Darla to lock the door, get some sleep. Then he stepped into the hallway, leaned against the wall, and closed his eyes. He didn't see the telephoto lens aimed at the 4th floor window. He didn't see Derek Sloan selecting photos on his camera screen. Photos framed to tell a story that had nothing to do with the truth. Derek typed one line in the email to Curtis. Run it tomorrow morning. 3 blocks away, Hattie fell asleep in her own bed for the first time in 11 months. The article dropped the next morning. 6:15. Keanu Reeves' secret. Hollywood star brings homeless woman and child to his private apartment. What's really going on? For photographs, each one stripped of context. Keanu kneeling beside Hattie. Keanu and Darla in the kitchen window. No photo of Pemberton humiliating a mother. No photo of a child blowing out candles. Derek had removed everything true and kept everything sellable. The article used phrases like sources close to the situation and questions remain. Every sentence planted doubt without saying anything actionable. By noon, 40,000 shares. Darla found out when Mrs. Odell knocked on her door the next morning with a phone screen and a troubled face. By day 2, camera vans surrounded the building. Reporters on the sidewalk with microphones aimed at the windows. Neighbors weaving through the crowd to get to work. Darla pulled the curtains closed. The apartment went dim. Hattie appeared in the hallway, holding a picture book, looking at the closed curtains, then at her mother's face. The happiness that had been in her eyes since yesterday started to cloud over. Mom, why are there so many people outside? Her voice dropped. Did I do something wrong? Darla pulled her close. No, baby. You didn't do anything wrong. Not one single thing. Hattie nodded. She didn't look convinced. She went back to her room and closed the door softly. Darla called Keanu. We should leave. Take Hattie back to the shelter. Darla, you didn't cause this. Running won't fix it. Stay where you are. I'm going to handle this. Day 3. Derek went on a podcast. Called himself an investigative journalist. Never mentioned a birthday cake. Never mentioned a bakery. Never mentioned a man who humiliated a child. He'd cut the heart out of the story and replaced it with suspicion. Reggie called Keanu. The team says let the lawyers handle it. How's Darla? Shaken. Hasn't left the apartment in 2 days. Hattie asked if they have to go back to the shelter. 5 seconds of silence. I don't need a lawyer to tell the truth, Reggie. He arrived 40 minutes later. Walked through the reporters without a word. Hattie ran to him inside the apartment. Wrapped her arms around his legs. I'm scared. The people outside are talking about mommy really loud. He knelt down. Hattie, look at me. Nobody out there can hurt you. The truth is you're a brave girl who deserved a birthday cake and a home. That's the whole story. He turned to Darla. I'm going to tell the truth. All of it. Live from this apartment. I want your permission. Darla looked at Hattie on the couch, holding her stuffed bear. Hiding hadn't protected her daughter. It had only taught Hattie that she was something to be hidden. Do it. Keanu opened his phone camera and went live. No desk. No script. Same black t-shirt. A few days ago, I was in a bakery in Glendale. A woman walked in with her little girl. It was the girl's 6th birthday. They had no money. The mother asked if there were any expired cakes. And instead of being helped, they were humiliated. The manager told them to leave loudly, while her 6-year-old stood there listening. Not one person said a word. Viewer count climbing. I bought them a cake and a meal. When I found out they'd been in shelters for nearly a year, I offered them a place to stay. Because a child asked for an expired cake on her birthday and got humiliated instead, and I decided that wasn't acceptable. That's the whole truth. He looked into the camera. There's an article with photos taken without consent, arranged to make this look like something it isn't. The man who wrote it sat in a car with a telephoto lens and photographed a mother and her daughter through their window. He didn't care about the truth. The truth wouldn't get him clicks. 200,000 viewers. I'm not asking for sympathy. I'm asking you to think about what happened in that bakery. A little girl walked in hoping for something small, something nobody else wanted, and was told she didn't belong because her mother didn't have enough money. If that doesn't make you stop and think, I don't know what will. The screen went dark. The apartment felt lighter. What came next moved fast. Jolene, the cashier, had been watching everything unfold with a knot in her stomach. She'd been there. She'd seen it all. And she'd done nothing. That guilt had been growing heavier every day. She knew the bakery had security cameras. She knew the footage showed everything as it happened. She contacted a local reporter named Vanessa Cordero. 2 hours later, the footage aired on the evening news. Grainy but clear. Darla and Hattie walking in. Hattie's fingers on the glass. Pemberton stepping forward. Customers laughing. Hattie lowering her head. And then a man in a baseball cap, standing up from a corner booth, walking across the bakery, kneeling down in front of a little girl. 30 million people watched. Every one of them could see the difference between what happened and what Derek Sloan had written. The tide turned hard. People shared their own stories of being judged for what they didn't have. The conversation grew beyond the bakery. Keanu posted one more thing online, a single paragraph. There are people who take someone else's pain and turn it into entertainment. They call it journalism. They call it content. But there's a simpler word for it. The truth doesn't need an interview to exist. It just needs people willing to see it. Then he went quiet. That was the last public thing he said about any of it. Derek Sloan's career collapsed the way things collapse when they're built on nothing real. Outlets pulled his articles. Podcasts distanced themselves. Sponsors vanished. People dug through his old work and found exactly what you'd expect. Half-truths, fake sources, photos stripped of context. He shut his blog down on a Wednesday in November. No announcement. No one noticed. Nobody destroyed him. The truth just made it impossible for the lies to stand. Mr. Pemberton's bakery didn't survive either. 1-star reviews. Staff quitting. Customers gone. He sold by late autumn. But 3 months later, Darla found a handwritten letter in her mailbox. 2 pages. Plain white paper. No lawyer. No publicist. Just a man writing about a moment he couldn't take back. He wrote about making a judgment in 5 seconds based on how they looked. About the shame, not of being caught, but of realizing he'd done it without thinking. That he'd spent his whole life measuring people by what they could afford. And a 6-year-old girl's birthday had shown him how hollow that was. The letter ended, "I am sorry, not because the world saw what I did, but because I did it at all." Darla wrote back, shorter, "I forgive you, not because what you did was small, but because holding on to anger would only make my world smaller. I hope you'll remember that every person who walks through a door is a human being first. Not a customer, not a problem, a person." She mailed it the next morning and never mentioned it again. Jolene got fired for leaking the footage. A bakery owner in Pasadena named Helen Garvey saw her interview, called the next day, and offered her a job. On Jolene's first day, she noticed a chalkboard sign by the register. "Every child who walks through this door is welcome. Always." She asked if the sign was new. Helen smiled. "Put it up this morning." The weeks after that were quiet. The kind of quiet that comes with healing. Darla started a job at a small accounting firm in Burbank. The owner, Grace Whitmore, had watched the live stream and thought about the woman on the other side of that story. She found Darla through the nonprofit Keanu had connected her with. Called her directly. "I don't need a charity case. I need someone who can balance a ledger and show up on time." Darla showed up 15 minutes early her first day. Hands shaking. They stopped shaking by lunch. Hattie started first grade at Maywood Elementary. New shoes, not expensive, just new. Blue backpack with a silver star keychain Mrs. Odell gave her for luck. By month 2, the empty bookshelf wasn't empty anymore. Picture books, chapter books, drawings taped to the wall. She'd started writing her own stories in a notebook. Girls who could fly, dogs who solved mysteries, castles made of birthday cake. Keanu didn't disappear, but he didn't take over their lives either. That was the part everyone got wrong. They wanted a love story, a Hollywood rescue with a romantic ending. That was never what this was. He visited once or twice a month, brought books for Hattie, stayed for coffee with Darla after Hattie went to bed. They talked about normal things, work, school, a recipe Darla was trying, a movie he was shooting, friendship, Simple, unremarkable friendship. Exactly enough. 1 year to the day after a homeless woman walked into a bakery and asked for an expired cake. Hattie turned 7. Darla woke before sunrise, walked into the kitchen of apartment 9, where she'd insisted on paying her own rent for the last 3 months even though Keanu's arrangement still covered it. She took out flour, sugar, eggs, vanilla, butter, and a box of rainbow sprinkles she'd been hiding in the pantry. She baked her daughter a birthday cake. It wasn't perfect. The layers leaned. The buttercream roses looked like clouds. Hattie's name was pressed into the frosting with a toothpick, but when she stepped back and looked at it in the morning light, it was the most beautiful cake she'd ever seen. Because 1 year ago, she had stood in a bakery asking for something expired, something nobody else wanted. And now she was standing in her own kitchen, baking a cake with her own hands, with ingredients she'd bought with money she'd earned. From an expired cake to a homemade one. That was the distance. Hattie woke to the smell of vanilla, walked down the hallway, saw the cake and stopped. "Mommy, you made that." "I made that. Happy birthday, baby." Hattie looked at the lopsided roses and the uneven letters and said, "It's the most beautiful cake in the whole world." 7 candles that evening. No extra one for luck. Hattie said she didn't need it. She closed her eyes for a long time, opened them, looked at her mother. "I wished that every kid could have a birthday cake, even the ones who don't have a home yet." She blew out all 7 candles. The smoke curled up past the window where the lemon tree was heavy with fruit, into the evening sky. Keanu wasn't there, overseas, filming. But Hattie had found a postcard in the mailbox that afternoon. Mountains she didn't recognize. On the back, in messy but careful handwriting. "Happy birthday, Hattie. Always believe in miracles. K." She pinned it to the wall above her desk. It stayed there for years. In the months that followed, a small fund appeared across Southern California. Emergency housing, childcare, job placement for single mothers. No celebrity name attached. Anonymous donations through a private trust. Keanu never mentioned it. Darla found out months later through Grace Whitmore, whose firm handled the nonprofit's books. Grace mentioned it casually. Darla sat at her desk for a long time, staring at numbers she couldn't read through her tears. She never asked him about it. "I sat with this story for a long time, and the thing I keep coming back to is how small the moment was that changed everything. Not the apartment, not the live stream, not the 30 million people watching security footage. It was a man putting down his coffee and standing up. That's it. One person in a room full of people who looked away. And Darla, 11 months of no home, no job, no safety net, and she still brushed her daughter's hair every morning. Still told her everything was going to be okay. When she finally got offered a hand, she took it, even though everything in her life had taught her that hands reaching toward her came with strings. Pemberton wrote that letter. 3 months late. But he wrote it. Derek lost everything, not because anyone came after him, but because the truth outlasted the lie. Jolene got fired for doing the right thing and ended up somewhere better. And Hattie, on 2 birthdays in a row, didn't wish for something for herself. Nobody in this story got a perfect ending, but everybody got an honest one. I think about that sometimes. A bakery in Glendale, a mother whispering, a little girl pointing at a cake she didn't think she was allowed to want, and a man in a corner booth who decided that wasn't okay. That's the whole story.